Hi everyone, very good evening. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. My name is Alpa Sharma. I hope everything's clearly audible and visible to everybody. Very good evening everyone. So good to see all of you back on this platform. In today's session, we shall be talking about your strategy that you should adopt so that you can clear IPMAT in the very first attempt. If you could quickly confirm that I'm clearly audible and visible, we shall commence with the agenda of the session. So, as the title of the session suggests, we are going to be talking about what strategy should one adopt, what planning should one do, how should one study that if he targets the IPMAT, both the Rotach and Indore examinations, or either of them, he is able to get through the examination in the very first go. So there are a few things that I would recommend you do, a few things I would recommend you shouldn't do, but all of that ultimately will help you get through your examination in the very first attempt. Hi Gopal, I hope I'm clearly audible and visible to you. Alright, so let's move ahead and let's see what all are we going to be talking about. So we'll be talking about we'll have an overview of the Indore and Rotach examination pattern and selection process in 2 minutes. And once we have an overview, we'll talk about individual subject-wise strategy that you can follow if you're targeting any one of these two examinations or both of that. So I'll be telling you strategy for verbal ability, quantitative ability and logical reasoning, all three of them individually. Apart from knowing the pattern that emerges over the years for IPMAT Rotach and Indore's paper. So let's begin with the session. Let's talk about the kind of paper pattern Indore follows. Apart from that, how does IPMAT Indore select people? What's their selection criteria? So let's talk about that as well so that we know exactly what am I preparing for, and then we'll talk about how am I going to be preparing for that. So let's first talk about the IIM Indore's IPMAT exam pattern. This examination majorly checks you on two sections. One is quantitative ability and the other is verbal ability. And quantitative ability has two sections coming up. One is an MCQ type and the other is going to be short answer type, subjective type questions. But ultimately, you have 30 marks of QA coming up and 30 marks of VA, that is verbal ability, coming up. You'll be getting these two sections. Now, +1 for every +3 for every correct answer, -1 for every incorrect answer, but there's no negative marking for the short answer type QA questions. Is that the only selection criteria IPMAT has? No, that is not. Apart from sitting for the IPMAT written examination, objective examination, you need to be sitting for a personal interview as well. And 35% weightage will be given to your personal interview in your final cumulative selection score. So whatever score you've got in the IPMAT subjective objective paper, 65% weightage given to your score in IPMAT and 35% weightage given to your personal interview. That means the catch here is merely sitting and clearing IPMAT is not the ultimate goal. I need to be sitting for the interview and sailing through it seamlessly as well is my target. So the strategy that I tell you today to clear IPMAT in the first attempt will be talking about your interview skills as well, because I need to hone that too. Merely sitting for IPMAT will not make sure I get through. IPMAT Rotach's pattern is even little more trickier. Then, let's not talk about the difficulty level. Let's talk about the types of questions that come. So let's talk about IPMAT Rotach's pattern as well. And then combining these two, we'll talk about individual subject-wise strategic plan. Okay. So here we go. Let's talk about the Rotach pattern. Rotach has logical reasoning also coming up apart from QA and VA. Unlike Indore, where only QA and VA was asked, here you have logical reasoning as well coming up. So 40 marks each section. Of course, there's a negative marking on 1/4 as well. So 40 marks for QA, 40 marks for LR, 40 marks for VA. Equal weightage for all of them. Is the cumulative score enough for my selection in IPMAT Rotach? No, it isn't. Also, IPMAT Rotach gives some weightage to your interview scores. But then IPMAT Rotach also gives some weightage to your past academic score. So the ultimate selection in IPMAT Rotach will happen as a cumulative scores of 45% weightage given to your IPMAT Rotach examination, 15% weightage to your personal interview, and 40% weightage to your past academics. Huge weightage given to your past academics. Now, can I do anything about my past academic scores? I can't. What's bygone is bygone. We have already scored that. But I can make sure I score really well in the IPMAT examination and my interviews. I can make sure I do these two. So ultimately, what should our plan be so that we score really well in these two examinations in the very first attempt? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's session. So here we go. Let's talk about verbal ability. Verbal ability is an integral part of the IPMAT, Indore IPMAT, Rotach examination. In both of it, one for 30 marks, one for 40 marks, we have verbal ability coming up. Okay, important weightage given to both the examinations. And ultimately, if my verbal ability is good, I shall be able to perform good in my interviews as well, somewhere or the other, because I'll have good vocabulary, I'll have good communication skills slightly. So verbal ability is interconnected to your selection process in both the ways, personal interview and your verbal ability section. Now let's have a look at the kind of questions that come up in verbal ability so that we know what am I targeting? What am I supposed to solve? Because if I don't know what comes in the examination, what am I going to prepare for? So the kind of questions, of course, predominantly we have reading comprehensions coming up. Reading comprehension is an inevitable part of every competitive examination. BBA, all of them. You have CUET, you have Christ University, you have IPMAT, you have NPAT. Reading comprehension is going to be an inevitable part of your verbal ability section. That means I need to be doing reading comprehension very effectively. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, depending on the examination, the number of reading comprehensions can come up. At least 5 questions come in almost every examination. So apart from reading comprehension, I have synonyms, antonyms, vocabulary based questions. One word substitution also is vocabulary based question. Idioms also vocabulary based questions. Then we have some para-jumbles, para-completion. These are verbal logic. These are called verbal logic. We have grammar like error spotting, fill in the blanks, sentence correction. So precisely, there are 3 sections that I'm tested upon if you talk about the verbal ability section. You have grammar, you have reading comprehension, and you have verbal logic, and you have vocabulary. So these are the 4 sections in which the examiner would check you on. Okay, so it could be grammar, direct questions, indirect questions, sometimes prepositions, pronouns, tenses. These sections are tested. Reading comprehension, verbal logic is para-jumble, para-completion, para-extension. Para-completion is a very frequent type of question that IPMAT Indore gives us. Many questions on para-completion comes where one sentence would be omitted and you have to find out which sentence is omitted from the entire paragraph out of the options given to us. And then direct and indirect vocabulary questions. Sometimes RC give us indirect vocabulary questions like contextual vocabulary. So this might also come up. So that's the core structure for verbal ability if we talk about the IPMAT Indore and Rotach paper. Let's move on and let's see what else is asked in the examination, and let's see how do we prepare for the verbal ability section if I'm targeting the IPMAT Indore and Rotach paper. So the idea is, of course, since a lot of weightage is given to vocabulary directly or indirectly, and my ability to understand a reading comprehension or a para-completion question better depends upon my vocabulary. If my vocabulary is good, I will be able to understand this and this in a jiffy. This as well, this as well. So ultimately, vocabulary becomes the foundation of my examination preparation. If my vocabulary is weak, I might actually suffer with understanding many things apart from answering the direct synonym and antonym questions. So we are going to be starting our preparation with working on building a stellar vocabulary. I need to have very, very good vocabulary. How do I make very good vocabulary? I start today. I started from the day itself. Whenever the examination is going to happen, I'm going to start it as soon as possible. I will expect you to read newspapers every day and take out vocabulary by maintaining a notebook. So you need to have a notebook where you're going to jot down the important words which you found in the newspapers, in the magazines, in the mock tests, sectional tests that you're giving. Why are these questions necessary, or why is jotting them down necessary? Because that will help me revision. So you need to maintain a notebook where you'll write everything. The same goes for your quantitative ability and logical reasoning preparation as well, which I'm going to address later on. But for now, you need to remember, you need to jot down words, because if you don't do that, you'll forget them and there's no place where you could do the revision from. So make sure you are writing things down. Where you're going to find words, not random words from dictionary. Please find words from regular sources that you're reading. It could be mocks, sectional test, the classrooms that you're attending, newspapers, magazines, novels that you're reading. Jot that down at the place. Keep revising that. You can also solve a very popular book that's called Word Power Made Easy. That's written by Norman Lewis. So Word Power Made Easy is one of the most popular books for vocabulary. I have solved it, my seniors have solved it, my teachers have solved it, and it's been there forever. I would highly recommend this book. You can easily cover up the book in 2 months. And this teaches you etymology and a very interesting way of working on vocabulary. So this is something I'll highly recommend. Please work on your vocabulary through this book as well. Apart from working on vocabulary, I need to be very good with my grammar knowledge. I might not have worked on grammar in my school because this is how it's spoken, this is how it's written. I know how it's pronounced. It's going to be correct for me. I've been there, I've done that, and I've suffered. Don't be a student who regrets not working on grammar rules. Grammar rules are very important for any competitive examinations, because if you do not know rules, you're going to make silly mistakes and then lose out on your score. So please revise all the grammar rules that you've done till now. Some important grammar books, in fact, one important grammar book that's been there forever. You have studied, I've studied, my seniors have studied them. It is called Wren, the legendary Red book, Wren and Martin. So Wren and Martin, for grammar and comprehension, brilliant book. You can start off with some topics of grammar. So it could be pronouns, specifically focusing on them, tenses, subject and verb agreement, prepositions, and so on. So you could start with this and then go on with more difficult topics. These are those topics where you could frequently see questions coming up. So do these topics for grammar. And of course, see, verbal ability is language. The gist of the language is how quickly, how effectively do you understand and read. So all of this can be zeroed down upon the fact that if you are a reader or not. So you need to be reading a lot for improving the entire set of questions that come up in verbal ability, including grammar, RC, vocabulary, parajumbles, parasummary, interview skills. You need to be a reader. So read to the power of infinite is something that I'll recommend. What do you read? You could read newspapers. You have to. Okay, so you have to read newspapers. You should also sometimes read good journals and magazines like aeon.co, the New York Times, the Guardian, Mint, Open. You could read any of the magazines and journals that are available. That if you can find anything that's interesting for you, that's business based. There are many articles on business that come up in New York Times. Lately, last week, New York Times is full of very interesting articles, Mint as well. So you could find any one that you find interesting and then read on. But make sure you read at least 2 to 3 articles every day. That's necessary because if you don't read, you cannot perform good at reading comprehension. So these are a few recommendations for verbal ability. Apart from that, I expect you to take a lot of sectional tests. See, we're talking about how to clear IPMAT in the very first attempt. And we need to remember this, that there is something that toppers do differently. What is that toppers do differently? Toppers are avid test takers and avid test analyzers. Understand the difference. Merely taking test is not important. Taking test, analyzing them, improving on your mistakes, redoing the questions that you've got wrong. That's what's necessary. So if there's a topper and you speak to the topper, he will absolutely tell you, I took my sectional tests and my mocks very sincerely. I took a lot of them. And once I took them, I analyzed them. So you have to take a lot of sectional tests. Plus, I would highly recommend at least one mock every week. Okay? And then analyze it throughout the week whenever you've got time. That's really necessary for you to do. Okay? You could read magazines. I've already recommended that. Keep a track of what has been appearing in the previous year papers. So please solve all the previous year paper questions. Okay? All the previous year paper questions that are available, so that you know what exactly comes in the examination. You should be able to solve that. Take these previous year paper questions as tests. Solve all of them and keep practicing communication because you'll have to sit for your interviews as well. So wherever you get a chance, make sure you communicate with people in English so that you're able to recollect the words, you are able to reuse the words, and you're able to express yourself well like you have to do in an interview. So these are the few things that I expect you to do for verbal ability. I hope that made sense, everyone. Now let's talk about quantitative ability. You have to give me a second so that I can have a sip of water. All right. So let's talk about quantitative ability. Now, quantitative ability, if you look at IPMAT, in comparison to any other BBA entrance examination or in comparison to any other entrance examination after 12th, quantitative ability in IPMAT is one of the most difficult comparative to the others. So you need to practice a lot here that I expect out of you. Can I make a plan so that I can start with basics and reach the difficult ones in a strategy? Yes, I have one for you. So I would expect you to start with TDS, time and work, average, percentage, ratio proportion, log, inequality, functions, set, permutation combinations, probability, number theory. Number theory, sets, functions, relations. These are a few topics that probably haven't been taught to you till your 10th grade. But average, percentage, ratio proportion, these must have been taught to you till your 10th. So you can start with your basic class 10th and class 12th, in fact 11th as well, CBSE maths book. Start with basic ones, okay? So you can start with ratio proportion, then percentage, then average, and then you can move on to the difficult topics. So these are some basic topics that are asked. Please gather your CBSE, rather you can start with a little earlier as well. Class 8th, 9th can also work because average, ratio proportion are taught pretty early. So you can start with 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you can solve these books, okay? These questions are easy, but I need to increase my difficulty level. Also remember, I need to be very quick. So I need to be quick and my reliance on the calculator has to be negligible. So while you're practicing this, you need to be practicing mentally. You can't sit in the examination and practice with a calculator. So your reliance on the calculator has to be negligible. So whenever you're practicing, rely least on calculators and build your calculation speeds faster. You could do Vedic maths if you need to practice harder, if you need to be faster with your calculations. Okay. And arithmetic also is an important topic. So you need to be focusing a lot on arithmetic. After you're done with building your basic calculation skills, you're quick with calculations, you're good with arithmetic, time, speed, distance, ratio, proportion, average, sets. If you're done with that, you could move to a little different topic like algebra, PNC. So all of these can be covered up with one basic school textbook. If you need more questions, there are many questions available on our app which you could as well solve. You could solve R.S. Agarwal, you could solve M.K. Pandey, you could solve R.D. Sharma for more difficult questions. Everything's available in the form of books as well as PDFs online. So for mathematics quantitative ability, this is what I expect you to do. I hope that makes sense, everyone. Could you send me a thumbs up, everyone? If you're able to grasp what I'm explaining. Is this clear to everybody? Just send me a thumbs up very quickly so that I know you're able to understand it. Everyone who's watching me live, send me a thumbs up very quickly so that I know you're understanding it, you're grasping everything, you're continuing with me at the same pace. Yeah? All right. Let's move on with our preparatory strategy for logical reasoning. Okay. But before that, I was talking about something that toppers do differently. Yeah. And I said toppers take a lot of marks. I said toppers analyze their marks. There's another thing that toppers do differently, and that is they are no hoarders. Who are hoarders? Who keep collecting material, idhar ka, udhar ka. They keep collecting a lot of data, material that I'm going to solve them someday. Give me question papers, give me mock test, give me funda books, but they don't solve it. Don't collect many sources. Stick with one at a point of time. Jump on or collect another only when you've done one source. Don't be a hoarder. Be somebody who is done with one book. That's when he'll start looking out for another one outside. So make sure because if you look at multiple sources, you'll be utterly confused, specifically for mathematics. Stick to one source, solve it. Once you're done with that, you could jump onto the other. Okay. All right. In maths as well, I would recommend you have a notebook where you have all your important formulas and special types of questions mentioned. This is going to be useful for your revision in quantitative ability. So similarly, in verbal ability, you have a notebook for important grammar rules, vocabulary words. Here also in quantitative ability, you have a notebook for your important formulas and important special questions where you were stuck. You could use this book for revision anytime you are stuck with any kind of question. Let's now talk about the logical reasoning section. How do I prepare for logical reasoning section? So logical reasoning basically has two subsets. It has mathematical is logical reasoning, and it has, which is also called analytical. Okay, and it also has verbal logic. That is, you might get number-based logic question, you might get paragraph-based logic question. If it is a paragraph-based question that asks you which one of the following strengthens the argument, weakens the argument, assumption of the argument, conclusion of the argument, these are verbal logic-based logical reasoning question. If you have a paragraph where mathematical or analytical numeric ability is checked, you have to, for example, series completion, sitting arrangement, puzzles. These are analytical or mathematics based questions. So these are the two types of questions that you see in logical reasoning. Now here, Let's start talking about logical reasoning. So I expect you to start with basic fundamentals of logical reasoning, coding, decoding, sitting arrangement, solving puzzles, series completion, matrix arrangement, figure-based problems. These are basic, simple ones. R.S. Agarwal, M.K. Pandey, these two books with simple questions easily available in the market. But the pattern of questions, specifically the puzzles, are a little more difficult than other BP entrance examinations. So I expect you to solve all the previous year papers very thoroughly so that you know what comes up in the examination in detail. I need to know what comes in the examination. If I don't know what comes, I'll be always working on a source that's not good enough for my demand, for the examination's demand. So back to it, please start with these topics for logical reasoning, analytical or mathematical ones. You can solve this from M.K. Pandey or R.S. Agarwal, but later on, please move on to the difficult questions. These could be CAT-based QA questions or DI questions as well. After you're done with these simple problems, we'll move to verbal ability, or you can call it critical reasoning as well. So we'll start talking about the critical reasoning questions. Please make sure your fundamental of critical reasoning is absolutely clear. So when I talk about fundamental, what is assumption? What is conclusion? What is argument? I need to be clear with their concepts. If I don't know them, what they are, how am I going to find the correct answer? People take critical reasoning very lightly, and that's the biggest mistake they do. Critical reasoning is not a light subject. You need to practice, you need to understand the fundamentals. GMAT guide or previous year CAT papers is a very good source for all the critical reasoning questions, specifically the summary based questions that come up in the verbal ability section. So you can download all the previous year CAT papers since 2007. They've been available. Every year 2 sets are available. You could solve these papers. Many sets are available. Ma'am, I have queries. I'm 12th pass out. Commerce stream without math. Can I crack IPMAT in 2020? Of course you can. Of course. I don't see an ounce of doubt here, Gopal. Alright. So ultimately, please do not take critical reasoning lightly. Please first understand the fundamentals and then move on with practicing questions, strengthening, weakening, summary based, para completion based, and then do tougher and tougher and tougher questions as you go month by month. So after that, you need to analyze your previous year papers because they are important for each section. You could make a notebook here as well for important definitions, formulas, important special questions. But remember, we need to be practicing a lot. We need to be taking a lot of mock tests. We need to be doing a lot of sectional tests, a lot of time-bound practice. Why do I say time-bound? Because a lot of hitch comes with your ability to solve a paper in time. For each section, there's a stipulated time. You have to finish it off in that stipulated time only. So when the pressure is there on your head with the clock ticking, a lot of people know the answers, but they jumble these because they're confused and there's a lot of pressure and anxiety on their head. So remember, you need to be practicing these questions time bound. You need to know how to deal with the pressure, and that's what taking mock tests teach you. Okay, so ultimately, these are a few tricks and tips and techniques that I would recommend you follow. Every time there's a fog in your mind, there's a doubt in your head, come back to the session, watch it again and remember what I have asked you to do. This will make sure that you are back on track and you solve things in the right order. Make sure you download our app on Google Play and do not leave the session without liking it, without commenting under the video if you have liked the video as well, sharing it with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Thank you so much everyone. I hope all your queries were answered. Have a very good day and God bless you.